So I think, as with all things, it's like you develop a way of listening to your instincts in friendships. But what I've noticed over the years, especially for women, but especially also in myself, is this is very edgy territory, because I think a lot of fear comes up around disconnection, especially from women friends. And so I think women, we talk a lot about like doing the P's, the performing, the pleasing, the proving, the placating. I think this comes up in women friendships a lot. And I think in order to be an authentic relationship, you have to be able to have faith in it, that it's a strong place almost. The friendship's a strong place that can take what we call rupture and repair in therapy. But this idea that you can never have rupture, I think a lot of women aim at that in their friendships. Okay, here we are again. So this time, you'll notice there's nobody just between us. It's just actually us. And we are going to discuss, so we were tossing around the idea, we wanted to do an episode where we discuss friendship, because it's just such an important thing. And then we thought, well, that's pretty broad. And so we decided we would narrow that down a little bit to how to attract and maintain really authentic friendships. So, those friendships that mold you, shape you, support you, help you grow. And so we thought there's a lot in that to discuss, stuff that we've experienced in our friendship, stuff that we experience in our clients and work with in our clients over the years, and things that we've dealt with, each of us have dealt with in our own therapies over the years. So we thought we would bring this very interesting topic and just have a big natter about it.
Yeah.
So here we are. So do you want to kick us off first?
I think the aspect of like authentic friendships, it's interesting because I feel at least I can speak for myself. I think I can only know authenticity or experience authenticity when I show up as my authentic self. And I found the more with doing more therapy, even theta healing has helped me a lot.
The people in your life are like pieces of you in a way. They show you pieces of you, and they help you. If you can be mindful of that, you can get a lot of material to work with from your relationships. That's why, being single with cats is like an easier road, but being in connection with other humans is not easy, because too, what can happen is, yes, they're pieces of you, and yes, that's great fodder for your own awareness and analysis, but you can go too far, where sometimes somebody just is being a bit of a shit and need to be told, and need to be given a boundary. And how do you know the difference between when you're working with material that's your shadow that you're projecting onto somebody, and then how do you know the difference when it's actually an interpersonal issue where someone's playing out their stuff with you and you need to give some kind of firm boundary? And I think for women, this gets like murky, because you can go too far and take too much responsibility in the relationship, and then you get this sort of analysis paralysis thing that can happen. So I think, as with all things, it's like you develop a way of listening to your instincts in friendships. But what I've noticed over the years, especially for women, but especially also in myself, is this is very edgy territory, because I think a lot of fear comes up around disconnection, especially from women friends. And so I think women, we talk a lot about like doing the P's, the performing, the pleasing, the proving, the placating. I think this comes up in women friendships a lot. And I think in order to be an authentic relationship, you have to be able to have faith in it, that it's a strong place almost. The friendship's a strong place that can take what we call rupture and repair in therapy. But But this idea that you can never have rupture, I think a lot of women aim at that in their friendships. You know, like women who are maybe leaning more towards the end of the pool where they don't want superficial relationships. I think the other shadow that can creep in is this relationship can always be harmonious. And it's not going to be. It's not going to be if it's real. And that's very scary. Yeah. Like you and I have had those moments and they've been really traumatic for me, really traumatic. So yeah, maybe we can talk about how to navigate that a bit.
Even like you were saying about if someone's being a little shit,
yep.
you know, setting the boundary of being like, no, that's something as women, we, like for me at least, it's been about exercising that part of me that's like, fuck no, you know, this, you know, but again, that relationship can provide me a great opportunity for me to work that part of me.
Yeah.
And I found, and again, not with all obviously, but friends that can check each other, you know, I don't know which rap song, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, honestly, like I've had that with my brother, with me, or me with him, or me with my friends. It's been really helpful.
Yeah.
You know, when you have someone to check you, you know, sometimes, because I think you're right, we can get into our story from an analysis paralysis perspective, or even into we don't see ourselves. There's no, and so it can provide a really good way of like seeing a different aspect of self if we allow it. But yeah, you're right. Like it is uncomfortable territory, especially, I think it's this, you know, when you find somebody that you really click with, I find this, you click with and you get on so well and you really enjoy it and you're like, oh my God, I feel so good. Like it's butterfly good, not nervous system negative, but like really like just, this feels like home to me. But then what shows up? Oh my God. What if she rejects me? What if, you know, like the brain kind of just hijacks and especially in certain situations when it perceives that there could be a threat here. And sometimes I feel that there's this authenticity of a connection that's so beautiful. And sometimes what stops it from even growing is that fear of, what if I lose this?
Yep, because that's the conundrum for that feeling to show up. There's enough connection with that person that potential for growth is large, but that's going to require risking the relationship. Like it's going to require, that's why I'm wondering about like what's needed in relationships to keep them safe places, like to keep that faith intact. And I think it's discussing this sort of stuff. Like it's discussing like how we might trigger each other or what happens when, almost like you map the territory of your codes of conduct beforehand, like you're preparing for it. I know that sounds a little bit weird and maybe some people wouldn't like to do that, but I know for me it makes me feel safer. Like you and I have had a lot of those type of discussions. And I think that makes me sort of trust the relationship more. But even then, my own baggage will show up. You know, we've all experienced different traumas in relationships. And I'm not talking, well, some people have had big T trauma, but even little ones, like little ruptures that never got fixed or made you feel bad, like going all the way back to when you were a kid. And so I'll notice some of that material still playing out. Like classic ones is when you've written a message on WhatsApp and it's got 2 blue ticks, so it's been read, but there's no response for like a day or a day and a half. Like this is commonly activating for a lot of people, right? And it's really funny to see the different reactions people will have to that. I know for me, what I immediately go to is a little bit of, have I done something wrong? You know, I'll go to that position. Whereas somebody else might reflexively go to, oh, they're busy, which is usually the case, or not attached to their phone or doing something else in their life. But I'll tend to go to, what have I done wrong? It's that's that sense of too much responsibility in relationships that I carry from childhood. Where do you go? Like if that happens to you, do you even think about it?
For me, it's like if say, I will, what do you call that? When you recall. Say
Yeah.
we'll go out, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I shared, because I'm quite, me, I'm very honest and vocal, and Virgo sometimes critical. I'll be like, oh, this is too this. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I was too much. And maybe she now is gonna realize that I'm see me, and then maybe she'll be like, oh, ew, no, And so then that makes me I rehash, and then I'm like, okay, and if I have to keep reminding myself, and if that happens, that's also okay.
Yeah.
I got you. And I have to keep and I almost have to sometimes when it, I guess when we're more in stages in our cycle or whatever, where we're a bit feeling more vulnerable and that really creeps up, I have to like actually replay it and sit, like imagine my nervous system is feeling it so that I can just let it pass and if then I'm still okay. I also get this, and I don't know if this is again a childhood thing, right? Like, if, like, oh my God, does she think I'm as cool as that person? Does she think I'm as nice? And I see that and I'm like, oh, so cute,
Yeah.
But it's still because again, it's being with the cool crew, right? Like, I'm safe if she likes me and she sees that I'm worthy and valuable, then she will never leave me. So that's the strong conditioning I've had from childhood. Like, it's wanting to be seen as valuable and always needed.
Yeah.
And it's definitely with therapy, theta healing, and now I'm doing some somatic work. It's really helping with that, like, okay, and that's okay. That's cool.
So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How relationships, of course, trigger our schemas, like what we're carrying, like those core beliefs that we develop somewhere in childhood. Like that one's around the not good enough end of the pool, isn't it? Like, I'm not good enough. They're going to find out. I have to look for evidence all the time that I am good enough. Mine's about responsibility. I've got to be enough, like as in I've got to do enough for another person. So if I stop working for them, if I stop providing for them or making things right or fixing things, then I've lost my point, to be friends with me. That's the point. But these are healing points. Like, we've got to heal these, like how you said, oh, cute, like how can we bring some compassion
To them.
to those things, those when they're activated, but they're going to be activated probably in us until we leave the body, right? They're not like, we don't have a minus button for stuff that went in there especially into the nervous system around attachment when we were kids. And so we all carry something in this pool. But I think that's also really important to keep relationships authentic is you have to be prepared to go to the even if, like you said before, the even if position. Even if I get rejected, it's okay. Because unless you can go there, you can't keep the relationship healthy. And so you've got to be prepared to lose it and still be okay, and be prepared to be sort of healthily non-attached while being very connected. So I've noticed a lot of people will kind of strategize, maybe even reflexively or unconsciously around this one by keeping a distance emotionally. They'll kill some of the intimacy.
I see that a lot. And I used to admire that. I'm like, I want a bit of that shit, that cool, aloof, but I sometimes wonder, is that natural?
I think obviously there's different relating styles, but I think there can be a coping mechanism in that. Like, if I'm a little bit distanced from you and you reject me, or our friendship goes away, I'll be okay, but you've got to ask yourself, is that how I want to live? Because I know for me, I don't want to live like that. Like, I want to have the joy of the friendship, the full joy. And if that means that one day the friendship goes and then that really hurts, well, then so be it. But there's a bravery involved in really connecting with people, right? And you've got to be cultivating. But this is about, for me, this goes to spiritual practices, like cultivating healthy non-attachment to all things isn't detachment or aloofness. It's not that control, agenda, coping mechanism. What it is just relaxing into the self, relaxing into the kind of the way of things. All things have cycles. All things go through cycles. All things wax and wane, including friendships. But we get so tightly held on to them.
And
Yeah.
you're right. Like I agree with you that I don't believe it ever really goes. We can get better at sitting with it so that we get less reactive.
Yeah.
So now when I see that part shows up, before I would get hijacked and go into people pleasing and almost like play that role. Now I'm like, oh, like I give myself what I need and then I still show up. Doesn't mean the feeling is not there. It's just, yeah, it doesn't hijack me.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
Not to not have these feelings. We can't erase things because if you think about that tendency you have to that not good enough, if we flip that over and look at how that serves you, like it comes from the same root of wanting to learn, wanting to improve, wanting to grow, wanting to develop, comes from the same root. So we can't kill it because it's one of the best things about you, is your desire to grow and learn. But then you've got to learn to not be reactive to those, the sort of the shadow of it, which is I'm not good enough or I'm going to be deemed not good enough,
Yeah.
And obviously you heal through relationships too. The more relationships you have where you're adequately mirrored, as an adult, like where you're affirmed as being just fine. You don't need to hustle for your approval. Then that goes a long way to giving you the ability to not be as reactive.
Yeah. It's interesting though also, like, meaningful relationships, friendships are such a great, for me, have gone, especially our women's group, like it's been such a great way to practice authenticity, practice aspects of the self that are showing up, and it's like, what a great way to practice it, and I see that even with my coach, like parts of me that shows up, or in therapy, parts of me that show up, I start claiming those parts and I start bringing it into therapy, bringing it into my relationships. And I think that's, we need, like you said, being in a house with just your cat and not having friends. Where are you practicing this? Where are you understanding different parts of yourself if you don't have people to mirror that, and to bring up certain feelings for you to work with, to discover within yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's going to happen. Just how you react to it.
Yeah.
Like what's coming at you is that unclaimed material. So like, but yeah, you just don't want to go too far into analysis, and it's not always about us.
Yeah.
But
that's
yeah,
true.
but it's an arena, especially women's groups, right? Because as we do a lot of discussion about, there's been a lot done to women about other women and about what happens when you show up in groups of women, right? So the competition, that it's like a ripe ground for this activation of these early childhood schemas. We've all got experiences and learning histories at school where we were involved in some sort of mean girl type situations. Some of us were the mean girl, some of us, which is just as damaging. Some of us were picked on, or excluded, and all sorts of dynamics that we experienced, even if we weren't at those two ends of the spectrum. Somewhere in the middle, there's still, the fear and trepidation of being kicked out of a female group is real for most adult women. And so some will solve it. Like the classic one that I hear a lot is, oh, I don't really have female friends. I have men friends. And that just tells me there's something going on there about a big time wounding around the femininity, the feminine, like feeling safe with women is somehow missing. And there's some really good repair that can be done through connection with women. You don't get there in your own head.
Yeah.
Like anything, you got to go and have an experience and then work on it that way.
And yeah, I'm thinking about that, the whole relationship with men versus women, and why women say that they prefer like guys girl versus girls girl. And I can relate to that. Women's group has helped me a lot with that. but there's a certain, and again, that the role playing that happens with women sometimes, like, and this is just, again, my experience. I have found before growing up, it's just, with men, it felt more easier. I don't know why it just felt more easier. And the friends that I had that were girls, they were more girls like me. And I feel, I don't know, I'm curious what you think. I find girls that become friends together carry similar wounding.
Yeah.
Now when I look back, or now when I look at my, when we start being more authentic and vulnerable with each other, you start seeing that there's a lot of similarities, which is why we
Came together.
came together.
I think what might also happen with women who are, guys, girls, is when you're dealing with someone who's the opposite gender to you, it might be a little easier to not project on them because you're kind of letting them be different. And so you're owning yourself a little more when you're with them, and that feels good. Whereas that projection, when your own projection goes out onto somebody else and it comes back at you, it doesn't feel good. And so I'm wondering if that's part of the experience too.
That's interesting. I like that. Like, because I was thinking about, with women, it's just that competition. Sometimes there's that comparison. Whereas with a man, you don't really compare. You just, he's different, I'm different.
Well, you relate. Like when you withdraw, like it's like when they talk about when you first get into a relationship, like a romantic relationship, but I would say this happens in friendships too. It's this honeymoon period, right? Which is when you're projecting. So what you're actually in love with is the way that you feel about yourself when you're with that person, right? And you're projecting all this stuff onto them. So what happens over time is those projections, you have the opportunity to draw them back, to claim them back. Then what you're faced with is another human. Then you got a decision to make. Are you going to be in this relationship? And relationship then is sort of cleaner. It's like, what am I going to give to this person? How am I going to interact with this person? How am I going to be for this person, right? It becomes an act of giving, which is, can create a really wonderful relationship if both people are doing this. So, I think perhaps with the opposite gender, that's when it's not romantic. When it's romantic, it's very loaded with all of our early attachments and stuff like that. But when it's just a friendship with a opposite gender, I'm wondering if maybe those projections are just drawn back sooner, or you're just relating. You're not like, it's not clouded with your stuff. Whereas in women, what I've noticed a lot is, the wounds that women carry will be activated very quickly by other women's behavior, because it's just so easy, I think, to get into that reflexive place, and if women are carrying a very negative self-story where they haven't perhaps reflected on what sort of minds they've got, what sort of narratives they're walking around in, what sort of core beliefs they're carrying about themselves. If they haven't done that work, they will get triggered pretty easily by certain women who seem to carry either things that are similar to that or things that they perceive of as kind of the opposite of that. Like the aspiration. I've seen women get very triggered by women that they consider aspirational. And then, of course, there's the whole topic of in friendships that can come up, which is envy, which no one really wants to talk about. Jealousy, super healthy because it helps you clarify what you want. And, if it can be talked about, but envy can be really problematic.
I like, Rajad always says, jealousy is misunderstood inspiration.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what you were saying about people who like look at someone and be like, wow, I admire this person. And I don't know, for me, when I admire someone, I admire them. Like it's, but then, some people would, because they don't see that maybe within themselves, or, because actually, I'm trying to think about that. Like, sometimes they say, if you don't, so when I see something in someone that I admire, I don't necessarily see it in myself, but that I still admire it in that person. I think, wow, goals. I don't feel that jealousy, like, or envy or,
But that's because you've worked a lot on yourself and have a good relationship with yourself.
yeah.
So you think about, like, if you've got a fairly good healthy self-worth, yeah, you can be happy for like you can see someone else with something and just feel inspired or like goals or
Yeah,
just energized by it.
Yeah.
But if your self-worth is very, very low or non-existent, you're going to be quite triggered by things that you perceive
Yeah.
as worthy in other people, yeah. And so it's a little bit tracking those type of feelings, jealousy and envy, are a good kind of significators. I don't know if
because
that's
like
a word.
jealousy is like,
signifiers.
Like envy is like how I understood envy. Envy is like,
It's clarity.
Say you have some, but the meaning, like envy is like, say you have, I don't know, something I want. So I envy, I'd be like, oh, I don't want her to have it.
Yeah. Envy gets toxic. Envy wants to eradicate it from existence. I think there's a deep belief in somebody when they're envious that they cannot get that. And so, but whereas jealousy, I think there's a belief you can get it. You just maybe haven't worked hard enough for it yet. You haven't decided you wanted it enough. You haven't taken the risks you need to take to get it, but you could get it. So that's why jealousy can sort of define what you want to you. Whereas envy, I think, is very, very painful. And I think it is predicated on a low sense of self where you feel that that's just out of the realm of possibility for you. And so it's too painful to be around it. So you've got to try and kill it in another person. And of course, you see this is what, there's some thought that believes this is what actually narcissism is based around or based on. Narcissism is just really pervasive state of envy, which comes from core wounding, because narcissism comes out of, some kind of wounding.
Yeah.
But that it's this epic envy that just you're perceiving the self as so inadequate on such a deep level that you become envious very easily, and then you see the behaviors that come out of kind of a narcissistic style, that things like, the posturing and the big, bragging sense of self. You can see that as a defense against that. You can also see the gaslighting or the seeking to make others wrong, or bad, the splitting, the trying to get people to side with you and sort of split people from their friends. All these kind of classic narcissistic behaviors, you can understand it as coming out of a place of pervasive envy too, which is really sad.
It makes a lot of sense. You think of narcissist behavior and relating it to envy. Because, narcissism, you think of it like that is a deep core wound,
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, that it's a spectrum, and that within us always we can also have like tendencies.
Oh yeah, everybody has the capacity to be a bit narcissistic. Yeah, but it's just, is that a sort of a stable way of moving through the world for you? That's when it becomes really problematic. Not that you have to eradicate every single bit. We're all going to feel all the feelings, but how you respond to them. And I think if you've got good friendships around you, like you said about being checked, hopefully your friends will love you enough to tell you when you've wandered into that end of the way of being. Like, hopefully your friends will check you because they love you, not because they want to criticize you. I think some friendships can dress themselves up as, oh, but I'm just here for you, I'm just checking you. But actually what they are is narcissistic codependent friendships.
What does that look like?
Ooh, yeah, not cool. I've seen it before, where I've experienced it before, where you have a friend who constantly corrects you or tells you kind of what's wrong with you, quote unquote, for your own good. It's a narcissistic move, right? It places them in the position of the knower, the wise one, the therapist one, and you're not. And so there needs to be a certain amount of codependence in a person to stay in a relationship like that, like where you feel that you've projected a lot of wisdom and a lot of power onto this friend, and then you've got to stay inside of this frame where you're constantly being critiqued and everyone's dressing it up as love. Because I think a really healthy friendship has the right amount of tough love or honest reflections in it. But really, it's not going to be that often. You're going to have to be, you want to, and can you imagine if every time we got together, this is what it'd look like. Practically every time we got together, there'd be some comment from me like, I've been meaning to tell you, when you say that thing, I think you should look at that. I love you. You know that I'm just trying to help, right? But it was like every time, imagine if it was every time we got together, there was some level of some kind of comment like that was said for your own good. That positions me, or somehow I've grabbed a high ground, right? Whereas that feels very different from when you occasionally have somebody who comes to you who's thought about it a lot before they're going to say it to you. But because they love you, they're going to give you something about a blind spot. That feels very different. I don't know, have you had friendships like that where there's just this constant underlying feeling that they're the ones that are knowers and you're the one that's kind of on her way? It can be quite subtle.
Wow, I know.
No?
And maybe I haven't paid attention.
No, or maybe you haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
I have in my 20s. Yeah.
The constant criticism? No.
Just a constant pervasive criticism. I remember once I had a friend who used to do this to me all the time. And I'd spent the weekend at her house and she'd had these friends come and visit, and they were her friends, they weren't my friends. And she used to get really bothered if I got on with her friends, like she would get threatened. And so I remember I was hanging out with these people, and I thought we had a really good time, and it was a really fun weekend all round, right? And then when they left, I was still there, and I said, "Oh, that was so fun," and she said, "Oh, I need to tell you something," and I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, they don't really like you. They're just pretending to like you for me." Now, to this day, I believe that was a lie. But regardless, that's what I'm talking about. That kind. So if anyone's listening that has those type of dynamics in their friendships,
run.
Get out. Like sometimes you can work with that. You can call that person out. You can say, "Look, these are what I consider to be toxic dynamics in our friendship. Why do you do this? I've noticed you do it. Not once, but like I've noticed a pattern. When you said that didn't feel okay to me. Like why did you, But if you don't feel safe, you can do that in a friendship. If you know that even bringing this up is going to escalate, or that person's just going to gaslight you more, because it's gaslighting, right? You just sometimes got to let these friendships end. And sometimes these friendships can be very intense and can have a lot of love in them, but they're not healthy for you. Friendships should be a place where you're safe enough to spread your wings and grow and become more of who you really are and be championed for that, even when it's not convenient for your friend. Yeah. So yeah, it's a minefield, but I think a lot of women, especially women who maybe have grown up in dysfunctional homes where they've been looking to find security, looking to find love, looking to keep stable connections, will put up with that type of dynamic in a friendship.
Yeah. Like I'm thinking, like my childhood, like I feel sometimes I was a bit of a mean girl. I went through a phase of a bit of mean girl. And, now to this day, I still feel a bit guilty about it, and then I also was in relationships where I tolerated that from other people.
Yeah.
Because again, of the safety and again, I understand. Now I look at it differently because that was all like a what do you call, like a learning experience. So that now I know that that's not the type of friend I want to be, or the type of friend dynamic I want to be in. But yeah, I'm just thinking about, you said something once, we were talking about, when you show up, with your friends and being vulnerable about how you're feeling. And so sometimes people won't like that. Sometimes your friends won't like that. But nevertheless, you need to have your experience of being more you and showing up as that. And they need to have that experience too. Because even though that you said that before, and I was like, yeah, because even that experience, they might like it and they might grow from it, or they might not like it. And still there's a potential for growth for them too. Like it's a win-win, and it might not always look and feel great.
Yep.
And yeah, and that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, those places you get to in relationship where they don't feel great, but great things are happening. That's what you want in your friendship. But we tend to pull back from things that don't feel good. So again, that so much of working on yourself, I think, is getting distress tolerance, is getting good at holding steady with things that don't feel good, not keeping yourself unnecessarily in crappy places, but letting things, when it's in service of a greater whole, letting yourself be molded and shifted and changed, which will hurt.
It's
super
very
important.
interesting though, because when we were saying about like, oh, I don't want that person to see that part of me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, what are they going to see? Like, I know I'm a good person. Like, what is it? And it's like, I don't want them to see that part of me. And it's like, but that is a part of me too. I can be selfish. I can be mean sometimes. I can be, and I am those things sometimes.
Sure. But that's a control thing, isn't it? So the more you seek control, you try to manage the perceptions of other people.
Yeah. And it just hijacks you, even though and it's just so interesting how in friendships, the fear of really sharing is really there.
Well, look at how social media has maybe infiltrated and changed the space, right? So, I don't think anyone's on Facebook anymore, but Facebook, you have friends.
Yeah.
And Instagram, you have followers, right? So right there says something about.
Well, but Facebook also has likes. I think it does.
It has likes and loves, and Instagram has loves, right?
Okay,
Hearts,
yeah.
Right?
That's true, yeah.
So right there, you can kind of look at the sort of spaces they are, But then you think about what people are curating all the time. They're curating an idealized self that they're showing to their friends or their followers. They're showing this idealized self, and look at all the sort of the backlash comments and criticisms and things that happen in those spaces when people displease people, So it's already a strong tendency in us to try to maintain control over the perceptions of other people. That's already something that everyone has to do their own job with, right? Yeah. We spend a lot of time and energy, especially when we're young, trying to show up in the minds of others the way our minds say we should show up in the minds of others, which is crazy when you think about it, because one, it's impossible, you can't do it. Two, it'll just suck all your energy from you. It'll stop you from actually just relaxing and enjoying what's there to enjoy. But then you think about social media as a way of training that tendency even more. The way people are thinking about their experience from the outside in rather than from the inside out. Like you and I have talked about it, like we have to do social media if we want to.
Yeah.
If like, basically I was talking to my husband the other day, he's like, I hate social media, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, it's a place. If everyone's in the place and you're not going to the place, how are you supposed to contact the people who are in the place? Like, you've got to think of it as a place that you've got to show up in. How you show up there, though, this is really tricky. Like, I'm sort of racking my brain about how I want to show up there because I haven't landed on it yet. Because I know it isn't like a lot of what I'm seeing there. And I know that I get bored and back off it and get annoyed and drop it and don't engage with it because I think deep down, I don't want to engage with looking at my experience from the outside in. I spend a lot of time trying to train myself to have my experience from the inside out. And so to me, engaging even with a discussion about social media, my body starts to shut down. I don't want to do it. So I think it's a nice task there, like a consciousness task. It's like, how do we consciously engage with social media as an experiment and still maintain your own sense of inside out? But yeah, I mean, the fact that spills over into your friendship and relating style, where you're trying to only show your people who you care about the parts of you which you want consumed.
Actually, social media has helped me with that, as in me, how
Yeah,
I show up.
because you're good at that. You
Yeah.
show yourself.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the way to do it.
And it's like, but I was the same like you. I had so much resistance. I'm like, oh my God. And then again, that whole comparison thing, of like, oh, okay, they do it better or they know better. And that's still sometimes my conditioning or like past, like, oh, they know better. She knows better. And then I'm like, okay, but I know enough and I'm just going to show up with what I know and how I look and how I feel. And it's definitely been such a good experience for me to work that. And as you always say, like it's a process of figuring out as I move along, what is my unique way or my unique way of messaging that I
finding out.
Sorry, yeah.
Finding out through engaging.
Yeah.
Because you have
Yeah. Finding out, yes, as you go, as you go along with it.
Yeah.
On the journey. And it's okay, this might work for me now. Okay, but maybe then later I'm like, oh no, actually maybe I'll use more of this. And this is just my way, but I only could experience it when I was doing it. And so it actually made me more humble. It's made me more, I appreciate people more. Oh man, this is a lot of work to show up. But then I also appreciate myself and that I'm showing up as my authentic self,
See, that's great. That's good use of it as an exposure.
Yeah.
It's an exposure therapy, really. I think that anything can be used like that when you're working on being conscious about it. I think it's such a slippery slope, though, because it can touch so much of our inclusion wounds and our self-esteem wounds and our, just like a minefield, right? So
even the fear of being judged. And like, sometimes I have like, okay, but I said this, but they might be perceived this. And then, the lady I work with, she tells me, okay, and so what if it's perceived that way? And I'm like, yeah, like this is your perspective, right? And are you open to your perspective being wrong? I'm like, yeah, I don't, for me, it's like, I'm always open to learning. I don't think this is, she's like, so what then? I'm like,
yeah,
right. Thank you. Enter.
And that's what's behind, like social media is the marketplace, is the place you get dressed and go down to know that you're going to be exposed to other people. Other people are going to see you. They're going to have thoughts and feelings about you. You're going to say things. Some of the people are going to like the things you say. Some of the people are going to hate the things you say. Some of the people couldn't care less what you say.
Yeah.
It's a place that you're going to go and hang out. Now, we all know what like the tendency can be when we perceive threatening.
Yeah.
Stay home with your cat.
Yeah. And honestly,
so I'm currently doing that with social media. I'm not in the marketplace. I'm at home with my cat.
Yeah. Actually, even when we're thinking about interactions with people, I have that tendency where I get very stimulated and I just say, okay, that's it. I'm socialed out, finish. And I have that tendency to just isolate.
Yeah.
And there's one part that is self-care, but there's also one part that it is an escape. Because I am quite sensitive, so I get very stimulated very fast. And I think my level, and this has been a learning for me, my level of stimulation is sometimes because of that hijacking that happens, And so just the more work that I do has to just slow down and just sit with the moment, sit with what I'm feeling. Now the way I experience relationships and friendships is totally different. Like therapy has made me a better friend to myself and hence a better friend to my friends. the depth of my friendships. Like, you know, it's interesting. We were saying about the trigger. There's one lady who joined us, our group once 2 years ago, who now is one of the closest friends to me. You know her. And when I first met her, I felt very intimidated and like, I don't know if it's intimidated, but not comfortable intimidated. I don't know if there's a comfortable intimidation, but like,
Okay.
because, you know, she's quite, mashallah, she's a very educated, I mean, like she's very well read in the things I'm into, at least, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
And so she's very like, you'll say something, she'll not that she'll one up you. No, it's like if I'll say, oh, you know, I like this thing. And she's like, oh, and this and that and that. Blah, blah, blah. So I started feeling like, oh, what do I know? I know nothing. Like she knows everything. And even though her intention, and I know for a fact, it was never about, oh, I know, you know nothing. I was perceiving that way. So I'm able now to see the person and see my story and laugh a bit. And I'd be like, you know, whatever, you know, and the old Dana would kept that person at arm's length. But you know, doing the work, I'm like, oh, I'm curious. You know, I didn't let that stop me from getting to get to know her and get to explore. And now we're so close. And I actually, you know, I'm learning so much from her and she's learning so much from me.
Yeah.
And we learn so much in our exchange that I'm like, I would have missed out on all of that because of my ego. Fuck that. That's not worth it, you know? So now when I see that, I if I get a feeling, whatever, I'm like, oh, interesting, it's here, you know, and I don't let that stop me. And I think it's so true. The more we do this, the more we start getting clear. Is this the intuition talking or is it my fear talking? You know, and only with time does that sound or does that feeling, not even sound, get clearer for me. And I think, wow, I could have missed out on an awesome, nourishing, beautiful friendship, you know, if I listen to that fear.
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? When something shows up that's strong, you know, to train yourself to go, oh, okay, I need to see what this is going to be about because there's some sort of strong feeling here, rather than go and decide it's not for me. You know, I think where there's no fear, you know, you meet some people sometimes who are absolutely fine human beings, lovely people, could be amazing people, right? But just your energy and their energy just doesn't have much to say to each other.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think women will get guilty about that too, where they'll think they have to be friends with every single nice person that comes along. But I think there's an honesty in that, just to say, our connection's just not there. You know, at least in yourself, you probably don't go up to that person and say, hello, I've noticed there's nothing at all between us. When I see you, I feel nothing. I feel dead inside.
Clear is kind, right?
No. Clear is kind, but maybe not then. But when there is a strong feeling like that, like when you got triggered by that person that I know who it is, how can we lean forward into that instead of making up our minds and running away? How can we find out what that is? Because that's very interesting. There's fertile ground there. And then, you know, it might be that sometimes it might be that person, there's a real, no, I don't want to be that person's friend because we're so misaligned in the way we see the world. Sometimes that'll show up. But often it'll be what you just described. It'll be, you know, you've identified something you value very strongly being played out with a sort of in a magnificent way in that person, and it's freaked you out. Your ego's gone into I could never, and then you've worked with your ego and you've gone, I can, and I like being around that. That's inspirational to me. So yeah, it's beautiful.
And you know, and that person has now become someone that I can practice different things with.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
You know, and but the story I had versus the reality I'm experiencing are two different things.
Yeah.
So I keep, you know, and you're right. Like there are other relationships where I was like, okay, I'm going to lean into this. And you know, and this was a few years before where I would go and you're so right. You know, when you said about so you're in a group of people and, you know, you get along with some and some are great. It's just, there's no, as we say in Spanish, the spark, the chemistry, not because they're bad.
How do you say it in Spanish?
La química, like, you know, like, you know, like between the two, like there's no like a spark or whatever. And then, you know, you feel bad then you're like, oh shit, I don't want to make the person feel bad. And then so you make effort, but then you're actually exhausted.
But that takes away from your authentic friendships, because I think when you're prepared to let things be what they are and be honest and not have to hustle to make every single person your friend,
Yeah.
then you've got energy to really invest in the ones that come along that are for you, you know, that are saying what's for you won't go past you, you know. And then your life becomes populated with these really authentic, deep, interesting, activating people. And there's nothing better than living with that. I mean, I feel like my whole life is populated with people like that now. But I think we need to come back to this topic at another point, because I think this is a lot more to say on this one, but we're going to wrap up this one, yeah?
Really great.
Yeah. All right. So maybe in the comments, I'd be really curious to hear people's comments about their friendships and things they've learned over the years around these topics.
Yeah. And what are they experiencing? Like, what are the, you know, challenges sometimes that they experience with this?
Yeah. So let us know, and we shall endeavor to engage with social media.
Yes.
And answer. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.